Okay, I'm back here at the Pond de Timber Oak, finishing what I started in the first place. Regular verbs, endings on verbs. If you remember, the verb endings are I for ich, st for du, t for third person singular, sie, es, and any singular noun, en for wir, t for ihr, meaning you plural, right? And then sie plural gets the same ending as sie, formal form of address, meaning you, sie, and that ends in en. I've given you that explanation already. You could go back and refer to it, but there's two things I need to add. One, I need to remind you to also understand there are a handful of verbs to which this doesn't apply. Plus, there's a big segment of very, very important irregular verbs, and there's a separate heading on these videos for each of those. You could look up irregular verbs and how they are formed, and then this handful of verbs that don't come under either category. But this is about something I should have mentioned that is part of the regular verb explanation. And that is when the stem of a verb ends in T or D. Remember, the stem of the verb, you get that by dropping the en on the infinitive ending and then adding your verb endings to that. So if we have the verb machen, I drop the en and I'm left with mach. And to that, I add my endings. Ich mache, du machst, macht, wir machen, ihr macht, sie machen. However, sometimes the stem of the verb ends in T or D. A verb like finden, or antworten, or bitten. Okay? And then there's a little thing you got to understand, is that if the stem of the verb, after you drop the en and before you add your endings, if the stem of the verb ends in T or D, if you're left with a T or a D at the end, before you add a T, which you would do in the third person singular as the S form, and in the second person plural, the ihr form, before you add a T, or before you add an ST, which you would do in the do form, you must add an E. So well, here we have it. If the stem of the verb ends in T or D, add an E, okay, before adding a T or an ST. And then I give you some examples. You have the verb antworten. You drop the en and your stem is antwort. And finden. Antworten, by the way, means to answer, and finden means to find. However, it's used more in German because it's also used to ask of someone's opinion. How do you find my new dress? Wie findest du mein neues Kleid? We could say that in English, it's perfectly understandable, but most people would say, well, what do you think of? Or how do you like my new dress? And then you're left with find. You must add, and then you drop the en, you have find after the finden, and here's how that appears in a sentence. Antwortet mir. That E gets added. Antwortet mir. He answers me. Or, findest du nicht? Find, and then before you add that ST, you must add an E. Findest du nicht? Don't you think? Okay, and then one other. If the stem of the verb ends in S or Z, when you are in the do form, where you would normally add an ST, you only add a T. So if you have a verb here, we have putzen. You drop the en and you're left with putz, or lesen. Now that's an irregular verb, and so what happens in lesen, and you have to go look at the irregular verb explanation, when you add endings, when it's not in the infinitive form, this E here in lesen becomes an IE. And so your stem would be lis. Putz and lis. And what do I have here? I have putzt du heute? No S. No S. The Z eliminates the need for adding the S. Okay? Putzt du heute? Are you cleaning today? Or was liest du? No additional S. Just the S that's already in there in liest. Was liest du? What are you reading? And that's all we have for today. Remember, before adding a T or an ST, if the stem ends in T or D, add an E. And if the stem ends in S, just add a T in the do form. Make sure you also read up on how irregular verbs work. Okay, so till we meet again.